I think in the last 20 years, I have not learned as much as I have learned in those 8 years. I am a strong believer of volume is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is reality.
Okay.
Yeah. Can somebody invest billions of dollars into an entity which maybe is still not making money and take a bet? So that excited me a lot. Those are very, very boxed, compartmentalized, large multinationals. You can't even go back and say, hey, you can do it, something like this.
Hi, thanks for tuning in to On Tap podcast. Today we have Jaipal Singal. He's the Group CFO of ID Fresh Foods and has worked with exciting organizations in the past like Mahindra Retail, Marks and Spencers, and Urban Ladder, etc. Today we'll get to speak with him and understand how he has turned multiple companies into a profitable mode and get the nuances of how finance is run at big organizations. Jaipal, why don't you say hi to our audience and then we get started?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Soumya. Thank you, Tap Podcast, for having me.
Great. Thanks for coming here on a Saturday morning as well. Let's start by understanding your journey. Can you tell us what led to the current position that you're holding today? What has gone behind the years and how
Sure.
have you assumed this position now at ID Fresh?
Sure. So when I started, right after my schooling, actually, I was into my dad's business. I was running that business 24/7, 365. We were into pharma distribution. That business is still there and is being run by my brother. So while running that business, accidentally I happened to complete my CA. That was not by choice. That was just by chance. Okay, I'm running the business. Why not do CA? Which I always thought will help me run that business better.
Yeah.
After I cleared, I got a very decent opportunity from campus. So the idea was, okay, why don't I take the opportunity to learn for 2-3 years how large multinationals work and come back and run again that business.
Okay.
That 2-3 years became 5 years, 5 became 10, and now 10 is 20, and I never went back. So that is the short history of how I started.
Got it. So can you walk us through your journey across different organizations? You worked in India, you worked abroad, and worked with different companies at different stages.
Yeah.
Pick some of the interesting instances or anecdotes from your journey so far across different organizations and help us understand how all these different roles have helped you evolve into this CFO that you are today.
Yeah. So one thing which has helped me a lot in evolving where I have reached now is the 8 years of my running my dad's business. I think in the last 20 years, I have not learned as much as I have learned in those 8 years. Because when you run your own business, it is not, you are not restricted to one profile or,
Role.
one role, one function. You are everything.
Correct.
So that helped. And that experience helped me grow here. Because, for example, when I joined my first job, I did not restrict myself to one horizontal. Though when I joined, I was recruited as receivables executive, right? But after 2-3 hours in the day, I thought that, yeah, after that, what now? I have looked after receivables. I know everything is all right. So I started looking horizontally, even starting from my first job. Also because the idea was that, okay, learn as much as you can, because the idea was always to go back, right?
Correct.
So it worked both ways. I started looking horizontal. Company started looking at me at, the guy is great. We have asked him to do receivables, but he's doing payables. He goes into costing. He sometimes asks about MIS. So my first job was with a large Dutch, in fact, they are the largest in the world. It's called AkzoNobel Coatings. They're the largest paint company in the world. So that is where I think I learned the ropes. Of course, being a large multinational, everything was very defined. The SOPs, policies, procedures, those things were new to me because when I was running my own business, it was very unorganized sort of, you decide and you do.
Correct.
So I learned the importance of having everything organized, everything defined.
Right.
And the experience from business helped me, focus on horizontal and not vertical.
Got it.
So that led to then my second job. In fact, my second job, my boss, who was the CFO at AkzoNobel at that time, moved to another Swedish entity as the CEO. And he called me. He said, look, I need somebody in finance, but who does a lot beyond finance.
Okay.
Because that was a relatively smaller organization compared to my first organization, which was the world's largest. It was a little smaller. I said, okay, we'll join. So I joined then that entity as the head of finance. And because of my nature, I did everything other than finance. Even if you look at my job today, only maybe 30-35% of my time goes into finance. Rest of it goes into business, part of it working with the stakeholders, investor relations,
Right.
shareholder management, capital allocation, risk, international business expansion. All of that is what I spend a lot of time on.
Interesting.
And this was probably crisscross, because were running your own business, learnings from there, or the experiences of there are getting incorporated into the corporate life. And because you have that ambition of always
Going back.
once a entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
So that has helped. And after 10 years, I mean, after I moved to my second job, like I said, when my boss moved there as the CEO, I realized that those are very, very boxed, compartmentalized, large multinationals tell you what to do.
True.
Nothing beyond that was even, expected, right? You can't even go back and say, hey, you can do it, something like this. And,
Yeah.
this will be different. And those were also B2B, large B2B organizations. That is when I realized that the B2C part seems very, very exciting. I've been here for 10 years, large B2B, but B2C started to excite me because I was seeing the world outside, and I got a role in Marks and Spencer. Marks and Spencer, as you guys know, is the largest apparel, British apparel retailer across the
Right.
globe. 2-3 things attracted me to that role. One was, of course, it was M&S, so that itself was attractive enough. Second was, it was B2C, which is what I was looking for. And third was, it was a regional role, because till then I was only managing India.
Okay.
This came with India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. So they said, we need somebody as heading the finance for our South Asia business, and we have seen what you've done in the last 10 years. It will be very helpful.
Wow.
So I took up that role. That, of course, helped me starting to understand how other geographies work. Till then, I had seen only India. And after some time at Marks and Spencer, I also started feeling that I wanted to look at the whole private equity venture that was picking up in India those days. As we know, compared to the world, it came late to India, but over the last 10 years, it has picked up a lot.
Right.
So that started happening, and my understanding of private equity was very little. I said, oh, come on, I mean, how can somebody invest billions of dollars, thousands of crores into an entity,
Correct.
which maybe is still not making money, and take a bet? So that excited me a lot.
Yeah.
And I actually wanted to get into the private equity venture capital space.
Okay.
And just before the podcast, like we were discussing, they said, no, we want only people from IIT and IIM and what else and whatnot. You don't have, so we'll not take you. And so I knew somebody from this private equity space. They said, look, why don't you do one thing? You join one of our portfolio companies,
Okay.
which is where you'll get a similar experience and maybe exposure of working with us. I said, okay, very well, works well.
Yeah.
So that is how I ended up joining Urban Ladder. Urban Ladder, as you guys, all of you know, is it was a phenomenal furniture startup, now acquired by Reliance, but did very, very well.
Right.
Started from zero and became the largest online furniture retailer in the country.
Correct.
During my tenure, of course, I learned a lot at Urban Ladder. I started interacting with these private equity people. I learned how startups work. That was my first startup experience.
Right.
How private equity works, how venture capital works, what is shareholder management, right? Cap table, ESOPs, all those things were new to me, and those are things I learned there. And that is when the acquisition of Reliance was happening. I thought, again, it'll get into that whole boxed space, which is what I don't like. There was this exciting opportunity at ID Fresh. I was anyway connected to ID Fresh through, similar investors, etc.
Okay.
And they said, why don't you meet the founder? I met. And, that coincidentally, 1 year after I met the founder is when I joined. Actually, the offer was made almost 1 year ago, but I said, okay, let me think through. I mean, we just kept meeting. It was a casual chat, etc. going on. And a year later, I ended up joining ID Fresh.
Interesting.
And grew within ID Fresh to become now the global CFO. I started with India, then I started looking at GCC. Now I look after all the countries across the globe. And I also look after the exports business of ID Fresh.
Okay.
In addition to playing the role of the CFO, I also look at that. I also look at a bit of the international expansion part. Let's say we now want to expand into Singapore. So I've been spending a lot of time in Singapore these days over the last couple of months to see how we can expand into Singapore, what is needed, is there an M&A required, should we acquire something, should we set up on our own, should we distribute on our own, should we get somebody to distribute for us, all of that. So that strategy, once it is played out well, we then hand it over to the teams to run those countries.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. I think you should rename your designation to CFO plus plus then.
I hope so.
So I like the angle that you are currently looking beyond just the core financial responsibilities and
Yeah.
also exploring strategy, international business, exports, etc. Could you help us understand how did you get interested in this particular aspect of the business?
So, like I said, Soumya, when I started with as a receivables executive, but I was always into horizontal. So once you cover all the horizontal finance aspects, and if the mind still works horizontal, then you start thinking, what next, what next, what
Right.
next. It is just out of sheer interest. It was nobody asks you to do. There is no monetary reward related to it. So that if you do this, this happens. But it is just because I like it, I do it. Again, it goes back to those 8 years of running that business, right? I mean, I start thinking that there is a lot more potential.
Right.
If the organization has to move from here to here, then what next can be done?
Okay.
And obviously, I don't, there are parts which are already running and they can only be fine tuned. But I am a great believer of 0 to 1. It can something be created fully new, right? I mean, um, long back I read somewhere which has stuck in my mind. It says, if you double something, 2 is like twice as much as 1.
Yeah.
Right? It is, but 1 is infinitely more than 0.
Yeah.
So that has remained in my mind that, can we keep creating these smaller blocks and incrementally keep adding things to the block.
Yeah.
Whereas the existing block runs on its own, as long as these increments keep coming on top, even if they're small or large, keep adding to it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, in this experience of, let's say, expanding globally, are there any specific geographies that you focused? Anything interesting in terms of insights that you found across locations?
Yeah.
And what is exciting you right now?
So I have also, I'm a big fan of geography, by the way, as such.
Okay.
So, for example, I've studied a lot on how the whole Central Asia part works. What was there in 1500s? Why was the whole thing called Persia?
Oh.
What happened after that? Why was Uzbekistan so beautiful and why it is what it is now? How does Iran work? Why? In fact, I have learned that Iran and Iraq put together were probably the largest economies of the world in, I don't know, maybe 500-700 years back. I don't remember the timeline, but so that always excited me. I thought that coupled with if I can go to those places and set up something,
right,
was very, very exciting. In terms of learning, I think every geography works very differently.
Yeah.
Right, starting from the GDP to the GDP per capita to culture to traditions to, the spending power, the eating habits right now because we are looking at food and earlier I was into furniture. So sometimes I think that I have done, earlier I was into paints business, which was more of, building, etc., than furniture and food. So now I've done, and I was in apparel with Marks and Spencer, so I've done roti, kapda, makan. Coupled with India, Southeast Asia, a bit of Europe, entire Middle East.
So these are the geographies that you have looked at.
That I have looked at and that I have understood nuances of those geographies. I completely understand that every geography is very, very different.
Right. Which one do you find to be the most potential as of today?
See, in terms of potential, in terms of business, I think I feel Saudi Arabia is really, if I look at today and the next 3 years, in the geographies we operate in, I have a strong feeling that Saudi Arabia will grow the fastest.
Okay.
India, of course, is there. India will continue to grow. India has, almost infinite TAM and the opportunity. So, barring India, if I have to look at international geographies, I feel in terms of growth, Saudi Arabia will be the fastest. I had never, I had visited Saudi Arabia long back and I was there about 3-4 months ago. The change is
phenomenal.
Visible. The change is phenomenal and visible.
Correct.
And when we meet them, I feel the plans which they have. It's a difficult country to operate and understand in some way, but once you understand it.
So what makes you believe that that is going to be the next big opportunity?
So, for example, we are there in, if I take GCC for now, right, every other country we are there and there is a limited time and because they always had the access.
Correct.
I would not use the word saturation, but there is some sort of a, point where we reach where the growth beyond that is difficult because population is not increasing.
Right.
The consumption in those geographies is not increasing.
Yeah.
Whereas when we go to Saudi Arabia, we see that the reach itself is not there. There is a large population which don't have access to products.
Okay.
So once you create the access, then that is your time.
Yeah.
We see that the kind of very, very innovative and new good changes they are bringing.
Okay.
will definitely help the economy get that boost. We see, they have a vision 2030. We see the kind of infrastructure they are creating.
Right.
We see the diversification they are doing from oil to non-oil. We see the importance on tourism they have been creating. So all of those will definitely translate into consumption going up. And
Right.
we, at least in my experience, as the consumption keeps going up, the GDP keeps going up, and the
Yeah.
business does well.
They also, because of the geography, they also act as a very important link in the entire trade route between Asia and the West.
That's right.
So that's another interesting element to explore there.
Yes. Yes.
Great. So since you talked about F&B industry, which you're currently handling, can you help us understand some of the interesting opportunities or trends that you see upcoming in the next, let's say, 4 to 5 years in India or globally, which can be very promising?
Sure. See, both are different. I think, India probably catches up a little later compared to globally. When I'm saying
Okay.
globally, compared to the advanced economies.
So that's true for F&B, you're saying?
That's true for F&B also. And therefore, the trends I'm saying in India could be different from trends globally.
Okay.
Trends in India, we see that, for example, till now, India was not into frozen food.
Right.
Everything, they believed in fresh. Anything in frozen, they would always believe that this is not good.
Yeah.
But when you go global, you see that frozen is what runs, those
Exactly.
countries in terms of food. Whereas India has the opportunity to continue to run fresh. We see that people will start picking up a little more into frozen, etc.
Okay.
In terms of the way the business is done, if you look at I don't know, any geography we can pick up, let's say US. I think 80% of the business happens in modern trade.
Right.
If you look at F&B industry, the way business happens are through channels, right? We have modern trade, we have general trade, we have e-commerce, we have B2B channels, etc. Across, maybe I can take Singapore, I can take UK or US. Give or take 80% of the business happens through the modern trade. Modern trade is the Walmart, Costco,
Correct.
Carrefour, Tesco's of the world. Very small business happens through general trade, and obviously e-com has been picking up a lot.
Yeah.
Now in India, if you look at, true for us and maybe true for other F&B brands as well, only 20-30% is modern trade. So the trends are different to that extent. In India, we see quick commerce catching up so much.
Absolutely.
5 years ago, 4 years ago, our business, 2% of our total business was quick commerce. Now it has crossed 30%.
Oh wow.
That is how the trends are shaping up in India.
Okay.
Similarly, the spends on food and beverages, because you specifically sticking to F&B, I think the per capita spend on food and beverages will continue to grow in India, will maybe not continue to grow in global countries. So therefore, to that extent, the trends are different. Maybe global will keep catching on the organic and a little more premium of it.
Okay.
India will keep catching up on eating out, right? India eating out itself was very, very less compared to, let's say, a Singapore or Hong Kong.
Right.
In Hong Kong, I was in Hong Kong maybe 2-3 years ago, and they said that we probably now have houses which don't have kitchens because
Oh wow.
the real estate is so expensive that
Yeah.
so they have 1 BH, 2 BH. So the kitchen is not required.
Okay.
Because even if you eat outside for your lifetime,
Yeah.
you will spend lesser than what you pay for the kitchen if you buy a house. That's what is happening in Hong Kong.
Wow.
So those are the trends. And obviously, because of that, what they've done is they have made eating out a little more healthier,
Okay.
a little more safer. In India at least, we feel that eating out is obviously not the healthiest
Unhealthy.
of the options.
Yes.
But in those countries, we see that they don't care. They say, yeah, if I can eat in a good restaurant, it is as good as if I cook at home.
Right.
So that's catching up there.
Hmm.
Whereas in India, branded packaged food is catching up. We see a lot of trends moving from homemade to packaged.
Right.
What happened to, let's say, yogurt 10 years back or atta 10 years back
Correct.
is what is catching up in all other food and beverage categories in India. Globally, we see a lot of movement towards premiumization, protein rich, organic, omega
Yeah.
3, all those things. And in some of the geographies, we see the eating out trend catching up a lot. Particularly, I've seen this in Singapore,
Okay.
even Malaysia. I was in Malaysia last month.
Right.
Even Malaysia and Hong Kong.
Interesting.
So I think which is, all put together, it is great for F&B player.
Yeah.
They can continue to focus. Every geography has to have a different focus, but then everything can grow.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I would also want to understand, and this is a little bit of a shift from our discussion
Sure.
right now, but since you've seen the finance world very closely and you've looked at large companies, startups, now at ID, which is scaling up pretty well, and not just in India but globally. How do you manage your own personal finances? What are your go-to strategies or techniques, or do you do it yourself? Do you outsource it? How does your personal finance work?
So I do it myself.
Okay.
My wife is also a CA, so she does a
Oh,
lot
wow.
of it. But I'm, in terms of strategy, I think I'm a very great believer of sticking to asset allocation. Decide an asset allocation, stick to it.
Okay.
There will always be instances where you will think, no, today I can do this and maybe tomorrow I can recover, all of
Yeah.
that. But in the long run, I think it doesn't work because personally, I'm a very strong believer of focus.
Okay.
I think focus is what can make or break things.
Okay.
And focus in a longish period. You cannot say that, okay, today I decided that this is my strategy, but tomorrow I change it. So, how focus, I'll give you one very interesting example I have. I used to, in National Geographic, you would have also watched, when a cheetah goes behind a sort of lot of deer. Deers are in herd and cheetah is generally alone.
Yes.
So, when a cheetah goes behind those deers, there'll be hundreds of deers, but the cheetah would have decided that I want this particular deer.
Okay.
And that is his focus.
Okay.
Even within the 100.
Oh,
So
wow.
he keeps chasing that particular deer only. If you see a video of cheetah chasing a deer, you will spot that.
Acha.
But coincidentally, the deer also knows that is how the cheetah works.
I am the target.
I am the target. So the other friends of that deer, they know that is the target. So let me do one thing. Let me try to distract the cheetah
Oh.
by coming closer to him than my friend, which he is
Okay.
targeting. So they start coming in between, right?
Yeah.
So that the cheetah thinks, okay, here's the distraction, and as soon as he distracts, his pace is lowered and this guy can run off.
Okay.
So they do that.
Okay.
But the cheetah also knows that this is the strategy that the deer's friends are adopting, and he doesn't get distracted.
Okay.
He doesn't get distracted. He's still
This is
even
game theory on a next level.
yes, but that is how it works. You know,
Yeah.
if you watch a video, he still keeps an eye on that target, and obviously in the end he catches the prey.
Okay. Interesting.
So it is all to do with focus. And therefore, coming back to your question on personal finance, I think focus is what is required. Strategy you create, but focus is what helps you maintain the strategy.
Okay.
And
So in this sort of strategy where you're focused and you've, let's say, decided on asset allocation today,
yeah.
for how long do you think that allocation holds true? How frequently do you feel the need to rebalance or recheck?
Yeah. So, see, it also depends on the life cycle where you are in terms of when you want to mature those funds. Let's say I'm looking at an investment horizon of 10 years for a particular event, and I stick to those 10 years.
Right.
Whereas in the strategy itself, there is something which I allocate towards saying that unless there is a change in the thesis. Let's say, for example, I'm not saying I'm doing it, but for example, I say metals and minerals, I'll allocate 5%.
Okay.
But unless there is a sea change in thesis where EVs start picking up and therefore metals and minerals start maybe not becoming so important, or let's say you have invested a lot on oil and gas and then you see solar picking up a lot. So therefore there is a change in thesis.
Correct.
So if there is a change in thesis, then obviously you'll have to change.
Understood.
But unless there is a change in thesis, I think it continues. Or obviously if there is a world event like COVID or some such happens, then you change. But other than those kind of black swan events,
Yeah.
I don't think changing the allocation works.
Got it.
At the same time, I'm also a large believer on index.
Okay.
Whoever created the whole index, I think has one mastermind.
Yeah.
And I have looked at data. I have looked at 25, 50 years of data, but I have, over a long period, index has always outperformed, is how at least I see it. There will always be cases where one index has not worked, another fund has worked, one stock has not worked, two more have worked. But if you look at everything put together, I have seen that index works well. So,
Got it.
on personal finance, I bet a lot on index
Okay.
and
Interesting.
leave it there because index keeps recalibrating itself, right? The whole
Yeah.
magic with which index was created.
Yeah.
I was listening to another podcast called Seen and the Unseen. There is a person by the name Amit Verma who runs that podcast.
Okay.
So there he explained how Nifty 50 was created, and that was so mind-boggling. Initially they said that let the number of companies not be 50, but let the number of let the value be, let's say $100 billion. For example.
Okay.
And how they debated saying that no, a person who is betting on index wants to
diversify,
and therefore let the number of companies be fixed.
Yeah.
Company can go out and come in.
Okay.
Right? Index keeps rebalancing itself. If somebody doesn't do well, it already is out of the index.
Yeah.
If somebody does well, then automatically the allocation on that, because I said asset allocation, right?
Right.
If a company is doing very well, automatically your allocation increases there.
Correct.
So
Interesting.
personally, I'm a big believer of index over a long period of time.
Yeah. No, I think you're right in saying that to some extent, being a little passive with your investments definitely helps. My personal example, for example, I manage my mother's portfolio and my portfolio.
Yeah.
And I'm very passive when it comes to my mother's portfolio. I probably open it once in a quarter or once in a few months.
Yeah.
But mine, I check almost every other day, right? And the returns definitely tell a very different story. My mother's portfolio is probably earning 5x or more of what my portfolio is earning. And this has a very big role to play. So as humans, I think we become very impatient with these things very fast. But there is definitely a lot of merit in just being patient and doing your research well, and then believing in the allocation that you've done.
Yeah, I think two learnings there is when the stocks start, when the market start falling is when, like you said, we start becoming impatient.
Yes.
And that is when I think we take wrong decisions.
Yeah.
Two statements I would say. Stock market is the only place where people run out during a sale.
Yeah.
Right? So, and which is so true. If there is a sale, if the price are, people start running out. Whereas if there is a sale in a Levi's showroom, all of us go and queue there.
Right.
And the second statement I believe in is that during a sale or recession, during a recession, stocks reach back to the rightful owners. Because that is when, let's say you or I don't change our strategy and we keep doubling down on whichever stock, mutual fund or index we keep doubling down on, and in a way it returns back to the rightful owner.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, very interesting. Jaipal, I think we're just about to reach the end of the podcast now. I'll probably want to conclude with this one last question, which is, you worked across different companies at different stages. If you were to pick, I wouldn't ask you to pick a company, but if you were to pick a stage which you've really enjoyed, and we know that you like to explore multiple things and have very good understanding of the horizontal aspect of a business. Was it your own business? Was it one of the companies that you worked with? What was the ideal stage for you and why?
So my own business was something I enjoyed the most. That is when I always wanted to go back but could not go back for various reasons. But barring that nothing can match that. But barring that, what I also feel that it is somewhere linked to your own personal life stage. Let's say, for example, when I started, right, when I was a fresher, when from campus, if I would have joined one of the, let's say even ID Fresh for now, my learning would have been far lower. Because that is when your mind needs to get structured. And that is, fortunately, I joined large multinationals. I understood structured thinking there.
Okay.
These organizations are more, like 0 to 1. So you need to be, how should I say, you have to be able to use a microscope and a binocular together.
Okay.
And using a microscope is what you learn here. Using a binocular is what you learn here.
Okay.
So, because if you have a mix of both, you are able to see the very micro details of, if I do this, this will, go wrong. If I don't do this, this will go right. For example, I read somewhere it says a smallest hole can sink the largest of the ships, including Titanic.
Yeah.
So we have to be very careful of those smallest holes. That is what you learn in this first stage of large multinationals. But you cannot deviate from a process. Very the high sanctity they come across on the SOPs,
right,
the policies, the procedures, the documents.
Right.
And at that life stage, that was very, very good. Now that I learned that, I think this is what I enjoy now more, because like I said, 0 to 1 is infinitely more than 1 to 2.
Yeah.
Where there you can still create 1 to 2, but not 0 to 1. So therefore here I enjoy, more now that I have those learnings. But if without that, this would have been very difficult.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No, great. I think that's a very good way to put it. And thank you so much for your time with us today. Before we wrap it up, my favorite question which I ask all my guests. What is the one book that you're reading right now, and what's your normal genre of interest?
So my normal genre of interest is history, culture, tradition.
Okay.
Right now I'm reading a book called How Prime Ministers Decide.
Okay.
Very, very nice. I mean, it really says, it goes back before independence of India and into, the various prime ministers, starting from Jawaharlal Nehru to Indira
Yeah.
Gandhi to Manmohan Singh to even it goes up to Modi. But
Oh, wow.
the book was written I think somewhere between the first term of Modi.
Okay.
Very interesting. I found that to be. It goes into details about Mandal Commission, what happened during Mandal. It goes into, let's say, assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, the whole LTT bit, what happened, how it happened. So I love that a lot. I in terms of historians, there is a person by the name William Dalrymple whom I really appreciate a lot. He has a book called The Last Mughal,
Okay.
which is what I'm also reading right now,
Okay.
and I like that very much. But those are history, right? I mean, if person doesn't like history, they'll not enjoy these books.
Yeah.
I also listen to same William Dalrymple has a podcast called Empire. I enjoy that podcast a lot.
Okay.
I also enjoy business podcasts a lot. So there is one called Acquired, which has long episodes on, let's say, Amazon, Starbucks, Costco, LVMH.
Interesting.
Very supremely interesting. I mean, it is so interesting that I've maybe heard to them twice.
Oh, wow.
3-4 hour podcasts I would have heard twice.
Wow.
So those are all my interests.
So, Jaipal, we have found out that you have a reputation in the market that you are the turnaround master for any business, right? You have led multiple companies to their profitability stage, which is in the current world something that all the companies are aspiring for.
Yeah.
Can you give examples of how you've achieved across organizations?
Yeah. See, I feel that it's not one thing which can make really turn companies into profitable. It is 100 small things which add up into turning it around.
Yeah.
Right. And it also depends on stage of the company. At one stage, companies need volumes. At one stage, they need revenue. At one stage, they need profitability. So depending on the stage, right, there is no one answer which can cover all of it. But eventually, right, I mean, initially when you start, obviously, you are not even aiming for profits. You really are aiming for market share. And that is when you should focus on market share. When you start growing up, when you are somewhere, in that mid-revenue stage is when you start looking at your cost line items. When you are a little bit more matured, you start looking at profitability from leverage, right? Leverage is one large thing which starts kicking in when the volumes come in.
Yeah.
So I think depending on various stages of the company, what I believe, at least towards the end, it should be, I am a strong believer of volume is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is reality.
Okay.
Yeah. So once you start focusing on this, and obviously when you start, you cannot say cash is my reality and therefore I'll not focus on volume.
Yeah.
So you will have to segue it into the stage of the company. But towards the end, it is volume is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is reality. Is what it works, right? And I've also seen, because I've worked for large companies, I've worked for startups, I've also seen that rich companies stay rich by operating as if they are broke.
Correct.
Broke companies stay broke by operating as if they are rich.
Correct.
So somewhere that management of how you want to run your company is what is material. How well you understand the profitability leverages is or the levers is what helps you turn around. And it will never be one lever. It will be 10 levers generating 1% each to make it a 10% profit.
So at ID, if you were to take some examples of what did you implement that led to their profitability?
No, so see, one is of course scale. Scale automatically starts kicking the leverage. But once you have achieved those minimum market shares, you start looking at, okay, which channel works better for me? Let me focus on those channels.
Okay.
It is actually, I also very strongly believe that it is more about your choices than about your abilities, which define the final outcome. Right? So making those choices, every day you will be faced with 10 choices as a leader. It is those 3 choices which you make really can make or break.
Right.
So, for example, you choose that, okay, this category works for me better. Obviously, I have to be in other categories, but can I focus more on this category?
Right.
This geography works better for me. I'll obviously focus on all geography, but can I focus more on this geography? These cost line items are in my control. These cost line items are not in my control. This is what can create leverage for me. How do I leverage? So those are the things, right? Between choices versus abilities.
Interesting.
Is something I believe helps. Ultimately, strategy is nothing but allocating finite resources against infinite opportunities.
Right.
So how do you allocate? Capital allocation, I think, plays a very large role in profitability. Yes.
Interesting.
Because where you allocate your capital becomes extremely critical if you're looking at profitability. Opportunities will be infinite.
Yeah.
Capital will be finite.
Yeah. I think this also takes us back to your point on focus, right?
Yes.
There are always multiple options, but then you have to decide where you want to focus.
Yes.
And focus with all your energy and resources there
Yes.
to ensure there is good outcome.
To some, and then one last point is on risk. I think, to be able to continuously foresee the risk and be prepared also changes a lot of things on profitability, because see, risk is something you don't see.
Yeah.
If you see something, it's not a risk anymore.
Yeah.
All of us are completely prepared for addressing that risk. So it's not a risk. In fact, for example, can Indian rupee to US dollar move to 90 today? It is possible, but it is not a risk because we know we have hedged it.
Yeah.
So risk is something you don't see. And if you are able to at least foresee whatever risk you can see and be prepared for it, helps. So to summarize, focus, choices, capital allocation, and risk management.
Interesting. Thanks a lot, Jaipal, for coming in today. And any last words for our audience?
No, it was absolutely my privilege, Soumya, to be here to meet you. In fact, I would love to stay connected and look forward to meeting you again in future soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today. We had very interesting guest, Jaipal. Hope you had good, interesting learnings today. And we'll catch you in the next one. Thank you. Bye.